It had been a standard night shift for the officers involved, with nothing particularly happening when a report of a potential suspicious activity came in. They headed out, and upon arriving, informing dispatch, they began their patrol. Looking up at the building, a hulking, rectangular construction thrown together out of poured concrete and iron girders, the officers couldn't help but think it was an ugly-looking place. Due to the size of the building, the officers split up to cover more ground, staying in contact over their radios. One of the officers was using his old model flashlight, which was long and heavy and supplied a full amount of light. Still, it was the best he had that night. The first two floors had been gutted years ago, with even the glass of the window panes being taken. Obviously, this made the place a hot spot for teenagers and hobos to break in, but the officer was not especially worried about encountering them. He felt a shiver down his back, and his imagination got the best of him. He thought he saw a figure standing at the end. He shook his head to clear his mind and saw that there was nothing there. He kept thinking he was on a normal patrol until on the third floor. He felt a shiver down his back, and his imagination got the best of him, and he thought he saw a figure standing at the end. He shook his head and cleared his mind and saw there was no one there. He kept thinking he was on a normal patrol until on the third floor. His flashlight dipping to about 30% of its light, making its weak light essentially useless, and the officer stuck in the darkness. Having patrolled the building a couple of times in the past, the officer figured he knew his way well enough not to need it. So he turned the light off, hitched it to his belt, and carried on in the pitch black. He felt his way towards the staircase back down to the ground floor, but due to the many branching paths, he missed his opening and ended up in a hopelessly lost place. He knew there was nothing dangerous in the building, but getting lost was not exactly something any officer wanted to admit over the radio, which could be heard across the local police net. In hopes of getting a hold of his partner, the officer started chirping his mic rapidly, but he didn't get a response. He kept chirping it, again and again, hoping his partner would realize what was going on. As he was doing that, he suddenly heard something nearby. Stopping his chirping, he stopped and listened but heard nothing else. He began radioing his partner again, but this time he definitely heard something. He stopped and caught the tail end of something that sounded a lot like someone crying. He got goosebumps on his arms, but he managed to keep his mind on the task at hand. Then he heard more movement. He stopped and drew his weapon, his heart beating hard. He called out to the officer he was with, but receiving no response. He shouted ahead to his partner to let him know his gun was drawn. His radio squawked loudly in his ear. He had turned it all the way up when he was trying to raise the other officer, and was nearly deafened by his partner shouting, "We got a jumper," Charlie said. He could hear his partner through the radio screaming at the person not to jump. Just as he reached the side, he heard his partner shouting and turned away from the building, as to not see the person land. The officer panicked and sprinted to where his partner was, and saw his hysteric and pointing at where the jumper should have landed, only there was no one else there.